But this isn't too bad. This is Andreas, and we've got a huge airbag. If he misses that, you know, he deserves to miss it.
Ready? Okay, Andreas. Here we go then, please. Turn over. Speed, Vista. Speed, B. Speed A.
Action!
You all right, Daniel?
Quite heavy-handed. Yeah.
Well done, that's brilliant.
Because
That's completely
it rolled early.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, well done, mate. Okay, lovely. Okay, good.
Man, what a cool dude. Chewing gum, falling like 40
man.
feet.
What's fucking hilarious was the Naboo guard that was up top with him, and you just saw him like shaking his head like a bunch
Panaka's doubly you couldn't pay me enough to do that one.
Yeah. He's like, bro,
Hello there.
I'm glad this is your stunt, not mine right there. But
Right.
yeah, hello there.
Kyle Katarn here.
And
Gonk gonk. Coming back for another episode of Dork Forces. Super excited for today's episode, actually, because we have possibly
a very
the coolest
special
guest.
guest.
It's so cool.
Very special guest.
Yeah, hello there to everybody that's been sitting here waiting. We promise you a good show tonight. No, this is going to be a lot of fun. Fuck that shit. Yeah, you wouldn't take that jump? I don't know, man. If that's what it takes to be in Star Wars, like I'll throw
Dude, the
myself
fact that it was
head first
shot
off that
97, amazing. The fact that it said the date of when it was shot was just beautiful.
You've gotta slap the dates on that stuff because it's absolutely like it's a time capsule and you're making part of history. You know people are going to want to see this for decades to come. So today we are joined by none other than Todd Cherniawsky, who is the production designer for Obi-Wan Kenobi. It is an absolute honor to say hello. Welcome, Todd. Thank you so much for being here.
Kyle, Bendu, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Such a treat. We have enjoyed Kenobi so much. I understand that you've seen our reactions, so you know just what was going on in our faces as all those moments were happening on the screen. And we just love to have this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about what the process was like to create the show, to bring it to life. So you are a production designer. What exactly does that mean?
So the production designer is the head of the art department. So if you take the art department away, you're left with actors in a white space. I mean, figuratively. Sure. So we as production designers build the world. And that can range from something like Star Wars, where we're creating everything out of everyday objects. We're finding the locations. We are working very closely with costumes. Props are under the umbrella of production design. Set deck. And the difference between set deck and prop: set deck are objects that the actors are not necessarily touching or can carry. So a chair and a table is set deck. The glasses and the beer on the table is a prop. A lightsaber is a prop. Blaster is a prop.
Does set deck get carted off at the end of the day like props do, or does it kind of stay with the sets?
Generally will stay with the set, especially if you're coming back. So as the production designer, I'm responsible for set deck, props, special effects, and visual effects. Although they are their own department, it's the production designer's job to spearhead and direct and guide them as much as possible. And of course, the director is all encompassing in every aspect. So it is their vision that the production designer is trying to build and carry out. We are hired based on our aesthetic choices, our knowledge of architecture, construction techniques, etc. But then again, a knowledge of special effects, visual effects, etc., to help guide the director. And then in addition to the production designer, the director of photography, the cinematographer, we kind of work collaboratively, very, very close with the director. So it's kind of this creative triangle between those three individuals who go on to, set the tone of the show, set the mood, set the lighting, set the color arcs.
Right.
Color is huge. Color and texture are hugely important, and we map those out very, very carefully. And then, we're usually the first hire. After there's a director and producers and a script, well before the cast is necessarily locked.
One of the first ones on board.
In the case of Obi-Wan, of course, Ewan McGregor, some of the reoccurring cast who are, Joel Edgerton and a number of others that are coming back. Those are kind of givens. But the rest of the cast is down the road. So the production designer comes on super early, followed very closely by the DP. And then we just spend the next, in Obi-Wan's case, the next half a year, just designing, conceptualizing, and then executing the vision.
It's a long time. It's got to be such a blast, though, just constantly, basically sketching, drawing, coming up with concepts. And not only are you one of the first ones hired on, you have a front row seat to pretty much the entire process because you're working so closely with the director and everyone else.
Yeah, you're there at ground zero, so you do get a chance to kind of see the evolution, see some of the changes, see some of the, every production problem is usually part of that process. So the production designer, on top of being responsible for everything that's on the set, we are there, the title production designer came about actually on Gone with the Wind. William Cameron Menzies was the first art director to get that title. And it was bestowed upon him by the producers because he was doing more than just art direction. He was producing the design and the execution, the staging of that movie.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Super complicated film at the time. There's not, a number of films that were utterly complex, but that was kind of the game changer for art direction in complexity of shows.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that came about. And then the one thing I do want to mention very early on is that I was one of the two production designers. Doug Chang, who's kind of the chief design officer of
legendary
Lucasfilm.
Doug Chang.
Legendary Doug Chang, wonderful Doug Chang. So we collaborated extremely closely on the entire production, and he had his piece of the pie, I had my piece of the pie. We share the pie, take bites from each other.
What was that like? Working with Doug, is he someone who's kind of protective of his concepts, or can you take something of his, completely change it around and hand it back to him, and he wants that?
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Gorgeous. There's a spectrum there. Doug, I personally can't imagine doing a Star Wars movie without Doug because his depth of knowledge. I'm not sure when he started working at Lucasfilm, but it would have been in the late to mid 90s. He's been there forever, and on top of his depth of knowledge, he's just a fantastic designer. So there'd be a range of things. He sets the tone, he sets the guidance for the show. He has an amazing team of concept illustrators, Ryan Church, James Klein. Anyways, the list is endless. So that stuff gestates kind of at a 40,000 foot level. So He's, in essence, it's what Ralph McQuarrie did for Star Wars. Doug does for all of the various Star Wars properties. He kind of leads the way and cuts the edge and starts to, define. It's like he gets the stone, piece of marble first and start shaping it. And then it's my job to come in and refine those ideas. In some cases, little pieces of the marble break off and they have to be sculpted, completely fresh. So there's a certain amount that completely falls in my lap, but there's an incredible blueprint that he's laid out. And I've been fortunate to work with Doug since the early 2000s. The first time our paths crossed would have been Polar Express. He was co-designing with Rick Carter, who, Rick Carter I had started working with, and he became my mentor. So it was through that, then War of the Worlds, I crossed paths with Doug again, and then just because he was at ILM, our paths inevitably crossed. Due to the films that I was working on, we inevitably were using ILM as our visual effects vendor quite often. So I got to know him quite well over the years. And then I was supervising art director on Return of the Jedi, or not, I'm sorry, The Last Jedi. And while I was in London,
by the way.
Oh, thank you. And while I was in London, Doug was, of course, overseeing Rogue One. So we rode the elevators many times in the Q building on the Pinewood lot on the corner of Goldfinger Avenue and Thunderball Street. So it was quite, our paths have crossed, and we've known each other for a long time. So to be able to collaborate at this depth on, such a prized possession and such a great character to the franchise was a real thrill. And he's amazing.
Kind of on that note, how long for Obi-Wan did the entire design process take? Like, were there certain things that just constantly, because of time restrictions, had to get redesigned, or how constant was redesigning throughout the production?
Redesign did not happen very often. There was a lot of, like I said, Doug has kind of, the high level concept stuff. So I think just, maybe as an example, let me just think here quickly.
Are you going to show us some art?
No, I can't. But, for example, in episode 2 for Dayu, Doug had generated amazing concept artwork, and the gestures were all there. But then what I had to do was start digging into, what does the tile look like in the city, on the city streets? It's a pedestrian oriented city. So I was looking at both Eastern Asian cities, Bangkok. I was also looking at European cities like Copenhagen, who essentially closed 75% of their downtown streets, and it's all pedestrian and bike traffic. So getting into the urban design level and the practicality of all that minutia and detail is really what I would call the design and redesign process. And it's not so much redesign, but it's a refinement. And part of that refinement is gestating the aesthetics to as simple of a language as possible, but it's also sometimes an economical one. What can we afford to do? And very often it's not so much do we have enough money, it's do we have enough time?
Yeah, exactly.
It takes so long to build something, and it takes so long for the paint to dry. And when I say the paint to dry, the paint process in Star Wars are amongst the most complex possible because they're so textured. So it's not like I got to put some primer on and then roll it twice and walk away like house painting.
Because now camera quality is a lot better now too.
Well, it's not only camera quality, it's just getting, for example, on Mapuzo, or on Mapuzo, Frex truck, like getting that rust level, that's a 7 to 8 day process of
drawing and layering.
Of 5 scenic artists just working their asses off. Because it's, as you say, I mean, you've got primer coat, then you've got your base coats, and then you've got lifting layers, then you're adding all kinds of admixtures to the paint to get it to crack, to get those crackling gestures. It's a lengthy process. And you're using things like rubber cement or waxes as resistors, and then you're overcoating and overlaying, and then you're removing those resistors to reveal the paint behind. And the scenic artists are just like Michelin chefs as far as being able to recreate with just paint and a handful of other amazing materials, all these finishes. The aging, building in,
I mean, they call it movie magic.
25 years of atmospheric reentry on an X-wing. So it's like, what does that look like? And then how do you achieve that?
How do you buffer that shit out?
Yeah. So that's, to me, that's where what I would call, it's not so much redesign, it's just the refinement of the process of how do we get the look that we need to. Not to belittle the design process, but Star Wars has such an amazing history of stuff. It's to me doing Star Wars is no difference than doing a period movie. I mean, like, Downton Abbey and Star Wars have more in common than you'd think, because it is
very operatic.
It's kind of digging into a vernacular that's been established. So whether it's Victorian England or early 20th century England in the case of Downton Abbey, or in Star Wars, Star Wars is already kind of a postmodern approach of putting human history and a variety of eras through a filter of a science fiction opera in essence. So, the Empire is built all upon brutalist architecture. So you start looking at the architecture of Mussolini and fascist Germany, and seeing what they were doing, the large block studies, the triangular shapes that the German expressionists built. So Vader's castle, that tuning fork shape, that's
fucking gorgeous.
Again, it's like those
fucking
shapes
gorgeous.
already exist on Earth. Most of what has been done in Star Wars is in some way, shape, or form gone through, a filter or a lens to magnify it or accentuate things that already exist.
Speaking of Vader's castle specifically, I know that we have visited this location on screen before in Rogue One, so there's a lot to work with already in the design process. But were the Vader comics ever a source of inspiration, like architecturally or even like aesthetically? Because it really did feel like there was more than just the on-screen canon being represented there. It did feel a lot like the Vader's fortress that we see represented in the comics as well.
Yeah, I meant to have my 6 graphic novels with me to hold them up to, prove to your audience that that we were very aware of all sources, and all of that stuff becomes a huge inspiration for us. I mean,
I'm so happy to hear that.
I was 9 years old. Like, I was 9 years old when I saw A New Hope. Like, I went to the theater the second weekend, whatever that was, May something, in 1977, saw it as a 9-year-old, and then saved up my allowance so I could go again in 4 weeks. So it's hugely impactfknow, and it always gets worrisome when you hear the odd comment like, the people who made it, they don't know Star Wars, and it's like, it's quite the opposite. Every one of us is hugely is the biggest fan ourselves.
Absolutely. And personally, I find it very apparent watching the show that a lot of love and even more so attention to detail went into making it. Like, I can see it.
Well, I appreciate you guys, noticing that and acknowledging it. And I'm on your Discord server, and I've got to just pass on compliments to your members, because it's a wonderful culture that you guys have fostered. And the people
shout out to the Discord server. You guys are awesome. It
seem lovely. I mean, I avoid, the social media. I avoid the whole the whole cesspool that exists out there. But when I came across, you guys, and took a chance, I'm enthralled by, again, the community that's here. Hence why I'm even doing this interview. I don't do interviews, but it seems like everybody here is is aware of that. And look, as filmmakers, we're looking for criticism. We're big boys and big girls. We want to hear the things that may or may not have been done well. But it's there's a way to present that, and the way you and your members do it, it's it's fantastic. So, anyways,
Really
didn't mean to
appreciate
get
that.
off
We're,
topic.
What did they say?
we're so honored to have you on here. This is such a treat for us as well, getting to talk to someone who has such firsthand knowledge of like this process. And like, honestly, you have the coolest job. Like, what a cool job to have. Honestly, being able to just like design some Star Wars and then see the things that you designed made manifest down the road too, like physically in front of you. That's got to be very rewarding. Just on.
I
its
think you're
own.
just a regular person like us, but yeah. Similarly, with a previous conversation we've had, you said that there was even someone on board that was sort of like would help, not cross the continuity streams like you guys.
Yeah, I wanted to know about that too. Like, what kind of conversations have been said about continuity?
Take that, naysayers. There's so many positives.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge level, of support at Lucasfilm, and there's a handful of individuals that are there to, just kind of always keep us in line, and there's a gentleman by the name of Pablo Hidalgo, and he really, for example, I needed to know just, confirm the history of paper in the Star Wars universe.
Interesting.
On Tatooine, where is their food sourced from? I mean, we know there's vapor farming, but we don't see any crop growing. So how does that stuff come into what neighboring systems is that brought in? What does their quote unquote wheat look like, and oats and barley and so forth? What are their vegetables? Kind of what is the history? So we're always getting excellent guidance in that. But the other nice thing about Star Wars is that it's a big universe, and the galaxy is a big place, and there's room for expanding it and further defining it. So there's moments like we really haven't seen, in Anchorhead, which is kind of the agricultural center. We know Mos Eisley and what it's about. We know Mos Espa, but sure. Anchorhead, we've just seen bits in the prequels. So this was kind of a chance to kind of explore the city market and kind of what does a cantina look like? What does a co-op, an agricultural co-op look like? So in the last episode, we see Ben and Luke go in for some new parts for the speeder and so forth. So that's again, an agricultural co-op. So there's places. Again, it's such a big, expansive place. We always have rooms to kind of go into new niches, and the guidance we get is to try to help set, define those parameters. Then, as far as trying to stay within the continuity of canon, that's definitely going to be happening at the higher level, at the script level. But once we start to get into, ships, colors of ships, classes of certain or subclasses of a class of ship, etc. As big of a fan as I am, that's where I start leaning to Doug. And even Doug will go sometimes, because he's just going to go, well, the way we did it on episode 2 or what we saw on episode 3, because Obi-Wan taking, 9.5, 9 3/4, 10 years later, we had to lean into it. It's in the same way if you're doing a period film, you want to be pulling from the decade or even 2 decades earlier, because people don't just buy new stuff. So like if you're doing an 80s movie, not everything's going to be 80s. There's going to be a lot of 70s stuff and a bit of 60s stuff and a small amount of 50s, because people kept stuff much longer at that time. So we had to lean into it and embrace a lot of that aesthetic at times. And then just be aware of it, but at the same time know where we were going. And luckily where we were going was what I grew up with when I was 9 years old, so that was all fine.
Familiar territory.
It was just really for me digging back into the prequel timeline and understanding it better, because by that time I was already in the film industry, so it was on my radar, and I really enjoyed the movies, but I think, as we kind of talked about in our little, pre-interview, it's like everyone has their version of an entry point into the Star Wars universe.
Right.
I was super fortunate to be at an age where, Star Wars 4 was my entry point.
I was there.
So I've
Yeah,
had this
episode one
privilege
was ours.
of it. But I can't even imagine, like, when I'm 80 years old, what the content's going to look like, because I don't see it slowing down. I don't know if it's going to accelerate any more than their current rate, because there's just
But it's not going anywhere.
But I don't think it's going away. And
Totally.
in the same way that there's room for interpretation with Shakespeare, I think there's room for interpretation in the Star Wars universe. And I know
Absolutely.
people sometimes get rooted in their entry point into Star Wars and just want lots more of that. My answer is, if you want lots more of that, just watch those over and over again, because as filmmakers, we just want to keep exploring it and start, not redefining it, but just like pushing out, and just trying to round things out.
Absolutely.
The whole series was just a beautiful, like, just symphony between the tension of Anakin, well, now, like, young Vader, and then Obi-Wan. Like, it was truly a love letter to episode 3, but at the same time, like, this really great introduction to the next 10 years of Obi-Wan's life.
It was more than a segue. It was also very much
the Vader and Obi-Wan moments, like, they were just so gorgeous. And then we also have the Reva and young Leia story going on too. It's like, these really high symphony moments, but like, and then just the raw.
To speak to what you're saying a little bit about entry points, I have so much jealousy on both sides of it too, because I'm jealous of people that were able to be 9 years old in 1977 and be in that first wave, because that's just that little bit that I'll never have over them, But then on the other hand, I'm so jealous about people that have yet to even be born, that are going to have this huge, just the smorgasbord of content to choose from. And like, the sky's the limit. There'll be so much Star Wars to sink into. It's almost would be an overwhelming experience, because who knows how many Disney Plus shows and movies will be
that way about Star Trek
in the next like 5-10 years. I think you're right. It may not ramp up necessarily, but it'll just continue to churn out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I have noticed a ton of details throughout the show, of very specific pieces of technology or little design elements that are pre-existing, like artifacts from other parts of Star Wars as well.
Which kind of goes with what you were saying of
exactly. Was there, like, what kind of lengths would you go to as the team to try and ensure that continuity was maintained?
Well, just a handful of examples are, when we started creating Tatooine, we found our location manager found an amazing quarry that was in the midst of being decommissioned and phased out by one of the local mining companies here in Greater Los Angeles. And oddly enough, it's right within the city limits. It's one of the largest urban open pit mines. And it had been in existence for a very long time. I'm going to say 100 years, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, because it's my understanding that a lot of the early excavation of aggregates and a variety of other stones and so forth were used in a lot of the construction of buildings downtown in early Los Angeles.
Interesting.
So it's a very, very old place. And
this
now,
was Tatooine.
This is where we set Tatooine. So as it's been kind of expunged of all the more useful mining elements, it's become kind of a sand bed, because although sand was pulled out of it, for the most part, it was kind of the waste. So the sand was just basically pushed around to the point of which is when they finally got as deep as they could and kind of exhausted the veins that they needed to, they were kind of left with just a huge sand bed. So we had a really, really good start. We had to bring in additional clean sand, but we jarred up some of that dirt and some of that sand, and made sure that Doug looked at it and they just cross-referenced it into their past libraries of aggregate. I mean, we just wanted to make sure that it was at least close enough. I mean, you don't have to be exact. I mean, fortunately, sandstone is generally sandstone, but you get the variations in those types of sand. So you want to be reasonably close. So
that's amazing.
You have to dial. You can't get Tatooine wrong.
Right. People will know. They'll immediately know.
Yeah.
So there you go. So for those of you that are saying that there was no attention to detail being done, and that these people don't know Star Wars, they had a guy comparing 2 jars of sand to make sure it was Tatooine
from the 70s.
I don't want to hear any more about like these guys don't know Star Wars. That is such a high level of attention to detail right there. That's amazing. I'm glad I know that.
Speaking of attention to detail, got tongue-tied. So like for the sort of black reflective stone of Vader's castle and using the water in the Inquisitor Tower with Obi-Wan's lightsaber battle, how important was it to use natural light versus having to go in and versus like CGIing the reflections and such?
You're talking specifically about the saber lights, the light from the saber,
or like getting those really beautiful reflections. And when we saw Alderaan, which by the way, getting to see Alderaan was absolutely amazing because we never get to see Alderaan. It was fucking beautiful, but like because all the floors are very reflective.
Right.
So like was it CGI?
Is it just like reflecting like the volume
on the thing, or like how?
Right. And I guess now is the time to probably talk about the volume, which is kind of it's an all-encompassing buzzword. It's like saying I need a Kleenex, or you're actually asking for a tissue. So the volume is kind of a definition of what that is. So that's like, again, saying like a tissue.
It's an umbrella.
We were very, very fortunate to use an LED volume system that ILM had developed over, I'm going to say at least over the last almost decade. And it's called ILM Stagecraft. And it is an extremely robust system that, was well established first in Mandalorian, and then utilized in Book of Boba, Mando 2, Book of Boba, etc. So it then had also been used quite extensively in commercials. And then the big advantage of using an LED volume is that because it's real time projection, you're getting all of those reflections, i.e. in Leia's bedroom. The reflections, especially
it's so beautiful.
And then, as you get into, just any of the Empire sets with the high reflectivity, again, that's where it really, really, really shines. And then, when you get to the streets of Dayu, the idea is that it rains quite heavily during the day, and then the nights are relatively rain-free. So the streets are always slick and wet. So all that reflectivity of the neons in the cityscape, that's all in camera. And that's one of the huge advantages of shooting in a volume, especially on, jumping to Mandalorian. You've got a guy who's got a silver bucket over his coat.
Yeah, dude.
So that's the that was right there. Yeah, if you were in a blue screen environment, if you were shooting process screen work, process screen work is the proper term. People say green screen. Green screen is just one option. You can shoot green screen, blue screen, orange screen, yellow screen. It's all available. I mean, obviously, green has an advantage. Blue has an advantage. Those are probably the two most common.
But it's process screening.
Process screen work, which comes from process photography. Back in, for example, back in A New Hope, process photography was the process of shooting multiple elements and compositing them together.
Gotcha.
So the process of shooting against either a black screen, a Luma screen, or a white for various passes, like the Dijksterflex, the motion control camera that John Dijkstra developed for New Hope, that allowed multi-pass recording. So essentially, or multi-pass filming, so that the same miniature, the same X-Wing could go through the same motion several times.
Oh,
so
yeah.
So you could shoot it front lit with a blue screen. Then you could shoot it backlit against white so that it was a black shadow. So that's how you got your traveling mats. So traveling matte photography was also kind of the basis of process photography. I'm digging way too much into film history, but these are the techniques which have not changed. We just use a computer to do them.
Right. It's just not analog anymore.
So it's really important for filmmakers to understand all those processes. And then basically the volume just kind of collapses a lot of that into real time. So the LED volume is not a magic red button. All that content has to be created. So that's another big part of what Doug and I had to oversee, which is the design, then the texturing, the painting, and then Chung Hoon Chung, our director of photography, would come in and light those sets. It's not just a matter of like turning all those neons on, because what happens is you actually get horrible lighting. So it's coming in, the DP is actually coming in, and it's not just a matter of it is tweaking every neon sign. It's putting in invisible cutters so that light is not contaminating your hero areas.
Sounds like painstaking work.
It's painstaking. It takes dozens and dozens and dozens of hours just to light one single set or one single content. And then, within episode 2, I think off the top of my head, we had 12 with 13 different volume contents. So episode 2 was by far our most LED volume heavy episode.
Interesting.
Some were much lighter, and some
I did want to know what percentage of the sets would you say were physical versus and shot on location versus like on the volume?
Oh,
like
sorry.
for example.
Say that one more time.
What percentage of the locations for filming were in fact outside of the volume versus like sound stages?
Right. If I recall, we had a 98-day shooting schedule. We were in the volume for 39.
98 days makes 6 episodes.
So that's over a third, but not quite 40%. And then the rest are either shot on traditional sets, like the Spice Den. Or the Spice. I shouldn't say the Spice Den. The Spice. The Breaking Bad room. We nicknamed it. That was just a traditional set. Because there was no views to the outside world, so that was just regular set construction on a set.
Was it kind of refreshing to take a moment to just like point and shoot, old fashioned, and like sort of take a step back out of the digital world again?
Yeah, that's the wonderful thing. For me, this hybrid filmmaking is what's so challenging and wonderful, because it's, the LED volume is it's another tool in the toolbox. And so there's not every set or environment is going to make sense to take into the LED volume. So that's to me, that's one of the really enjoyable parts of the process, is working with Deborah, working with Chung Hoon Chung, Pat Tubak, who was our visual effects supervisor, because we're all weighing the pluses and the minuses of trying to do certain things. One thing the volume does not do well is action sequences.
Interesting.
When the camera starts to move fast, you can get a break in the image. If you're, voxel and triangle, your polygon count, you should see the little server room of GPUs that are just cooking at 100 degrees Celsius.
One guy's job is just stand there and hold a fan.
You go in there and it's like a meat locker. I think it's about 1 or 2 degrees Celsius, and
it's not bad.
It's all liquid cooled, and it's an amazing piece of technology, but it has restrictions, and you do bump against it. So, for example, the rooftops the rooftop sequence of Ben and Leia running, that's just that is traditional scenery on a blue screen wrapped stage. So that's shooting traditional process photography, traveling matte. So we're just shooting against blue for all that. But everything has been very carefully mapped out so that we know as they're moving from rooftop to rooftop, where is Reva with that sign that she's, kind of doing the superhero pose on? What is that relationship? So we map out that, again, just going to episode 2, we mapped out the whole city, to within probably a 50-meter accuracy of where they are in that timeline to make sure that they're moving through the city, through, just, I guess, ultimately for the needs of the narrative, there are some what could be perceived as jump cuts. Like, how does Ben get from the top of the building down so quickly after he force holds Leia? So, but, how interesting is it to see Ben come down a ladder? So there are some things that, again, we take into account. It's just at some point you just don't want all the shoe leather.
If you can make the ladder visually interesting, like there was a sequence in the Book of Boba Fett where they're on the ring world, and I know that was shot in the volume where Din Djarin is in the elevator and he goes all the way down to the other level, and it's a very seamless, uninterrupted shot. I know you didn't work on Book of Boba Fett necessarily, but do you know how they achieved that? I know it was shot in the volume, and it's an uninterrupted shot, and it's very that's a little bit of the secret sauce, which I cannot share, because I did work on Book of Boba. I was not production designing. I was just doing concept design for Andrew Jones is the production designer for Favreau and Filoni, and he runs that. So there is an answer, but it's under lock and key. We can accept.
Yeah,
it's like
there are some things that we have not invented, but just kind of some techniques we've
There's some proprietary things that work there.
We're just, eventually someone else will stumble upon it and figure out how to do it, and then it'll just become public knowledge, much more.
I will say that as a Larry Niven fan, that ring world, amazing. It was great.
Yeah, it's a nice change for the Star Wars galaxy.
Now that this has come up, we didn't say this at the beginning of the interview, but we should say that, of course, it goes without saying there are certain things that Todd's not going to be able to answer for us because Disney and Lucasfilm wouldn't have it. I had as much explained to me in a very courteous phone conversation earlier, which I can actually share a clip of with you guys. It went something like this.
It's my territory, so whatever you're thinking, you better think again. Otherwise, I'm going to have to head down there.
And I will rain down on a godly fucking firestorm upon you. You're going to have to call the fucking United Nations and get a fucking binding resolution to keep me from fucking destroying you. I will fuck you up!
So I said, yes, sir, Mr. Chapek, sir. And I hung up the phone. And so we're going to be on our best behavior. I do have a couple questions that I would just be a fool not to try and get you to answer, but we'll save some of the spoilery stuff for a little bit later, so you can tell me that you can't answer them,
Sure.
In a little bit.
I may ask, though, was there a particular planet or was there some part of the project that was really your favorite to work on? Or like your favorite little, piece that you're like, oh, this day we're going to this place. All right, this is going to be really cool.
I think Vader's throne room was pretty fantastic because that was an all physical set,
which was just my god,
it was so heavy metal.
One of the privileges of my job is opening up sets. I mean, I am the guy who can just walk onto the set and say, everybody step aside, and I get to sit in the throne and just take 30 seconds to take it in. So
good.
That's a huge privilege to be able to do.
Is the throne comfortable?
God, no. It's ergonomically correct to Vader.
Right.
So, but
I really love that he just looks like an action figure. Just stuck, like they've folded him in half and just sort of like if the camera went lower, you'd see his feet going straight outwards.
Yeah,
it's hysterical to me, but it's very on brand. Why would Vader be comfortable?
I mean, listen, every day is awesome. I mean, it's like jumping into the little T-47 mock-up that we made. It just it's endless. It's sometimes I kind of forget how lucky I am, and it's all business. I walk onto a set, I walk it all out, I scrutinize it, I give a handful of notes, leave, and all of a sudden realized, like 2 days later, like, oh, we've already struck it, and I didn't, ingest it. I didn't take it in.
Right.
So
You got to stop and smell the
try,
Vaders sometimes.
yeah, I try to catch myself before I just treat it too much like business. The Jedi Tomb was another, really cool,
yes.
giving me, every time especially as Chung Hoon was lighting it, and we only built for example, we only built like the lower level. The upper level was visual effects extension, but just seeing the cast members getting suited up that were going in there. I myself, as big of a fan as I am, I don't know who is in there. I wish I could tell you.
I was going to say, similar question. Who decided the names of the Jedi that we saw on like the caves or carved into the walls, or like, who chose those names for you?
I think that was a kind of a threefold thing. It was bounced up to Lucasfilm. So I think Doug and Pablo were probably giving huge input. I can't say for sure, but I'm assuming Dave Filoni probably had some input. Deborah would have had a huge input with Joby, our showrunner and head writer. They would have been making a lot of those decisions and probably amassing a huge list and then just editing it down to the point of which we had X amount of people. And the reality is too, it's not everyone is a scriber. Not everyone necessarily left their name. And I can tell you there was a much longer list, which I can't share with you, of people that, wouldn't it be great? But, does it set up another, a can of worms? And that's, I think that's where, going back to your question about canon and, does it start getting someone's expectations too high and so forth? What I can say is none of those names or none of the characters that you see in the tomb are an accident. But they're not all there intentionally, like, oh, you're going to see these people in the future. Like, don't. I just want to,
it's not an assumption that you should make necessarily.
Correct.
You can make an educated guess about people.
There's sprinkles. There's sprinkles.
That's exactly right. And it's just
I have my own theories.
It's to ground it in the rest of this, amazing Star Wars universe.
And it's one thing specifically about those Jedi Vaults, and you've kind of already answered it, but being privy to so much of those conversations happening at the high level, were you aware of anything that like maybe you didn't recognize what it was, but seemed outwardly significant that didn't quite make it on the camera shot? Like we see these Jedi in these tombs. We know that there's a whole nother row of Jedi in the tombs up above. That was VFX department, so I wouldn't imagine that necessarily anything about those guys. But is there anything like around this corner to the left that the camera never rested on that like we might want to know about? Like little things from that set that did get fabricated. But Kenobi, he's never slows down. He just mobs through there. So we don't really linger on those details much.
It's the series, when somebody asked me to describe it, I said it's the Obi-Wan road movie, because this show moves so fast through the scenery that I think there's probably a small story to tell on each one, where it's like,
The Adventures of Quilt Parka. You heard it here first. It's confirmed.
Yeah. So for example, like, the Owen farm that we see in episode 6,
right?
Just inevitably, that to me, actually, going back to like, now that I think about it, that to me was the 9-year-old boy walking onto the Owen farm.
Onto the Lars.
Makes sense. That must have
onto the Lars farm. Sorry. Whether it was the exterior that we built at that quarry, recreating that painstakingly from all the production stills and all the screen grabs and frame grabs from the various movies. Figuring out, for example, where would Ben's vantage point be? Because we've always kind of seen and assumed that once you're on the Lars farm, it's every direction, it's desert. But if you reverse engineer how it's been shot, you never see in one direction. And there,
That's
you know,
so clever.
as we started to break it all apart and start to kind of take a plan view and start putting all the photos out, you realize that on a radial level, there's about a 40-degree viewpoint that you've never really looked down towards. It's actually where the gravestones are in episode 3. You see in kind of a wide shot, you see him walking to some gravestones. So
was there ever a conversation about including those gravestones? Were you ever asked to do any concepts involving the headstones?
No. We, you know, there's a whole bunch of things that I think, you know, like this, going back to your canon question, I'm sure as the show gets scrutinized, things are going to get kind of uncovered that we missed, we made a mistake on, etc.
Certain YouTubers are going to make some lore breakdowns.
Yeah, and you know what, and you know, it's so be it. I mean, I know already my mistakes, and I'm not going to identify them.
Sure. If we can't tell them, then were they really mistakes?
Yeah, there's a handful of things where it's like, oh, coulda, woulda, shoulda. But you're moving at such a fast pace, and I know 90-something days sounds like an incredible number, but you know, you're moving so fast. And you know, when I kind of started the show, which, you know, was the fall of 2019. I don't know, I'm getting all the years.
Oh, so just before COVID.
Yes. No, actually, I'm sorry, 2020. Sorry, the fall of 2020. And then we went to camera in the late spring of 21. So, you know, that 5.5, 6 months of time, when you start to do that math, so let's say it's 5 times 4, it's 20 weeks, 22 weeks. If you have times 5 days, you've got about 100 days of prep. And on a 100-day shoot, you've probably got, you know, at least on that Star Wars show, we had about 100+ sets. So that means every day you have to design, build, paint, light, and finish a set. Now, obviously, that's not the way it works because you have till the end of the schedule. But when you start actually putting it up on a calendar, it's frightening at the level of which you have to check these boxes.
And so, breaking down a day, what time are you getting started and what time are you done for the day on, like, in the middle of shooting, for example?
Well, a typical day is 12 hours, whether it's prep or shooting. I mean, you know, Deborah is, you know, a wizard at being able to carve a day out that didn't get too long. We had a handful of very long days, but for the most part, we always kept to the 12 hours. When working with, you know, a child, you know, Vivian has to be in and out of set time within a very specific window. So we can start the day early, work with, you know, Ewan in the morning and a handful of other actors, bring Vivian in, shoot her out, and then continue, or start with her first thing in the morning when she's really fresh and bright and well rested.
I mean, casting just hit the nail on the head with her, man. Like, I don't know who the casting director was, but
is it like a child labor laws thing? Is that why she had to be?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
It's not because she was cranky and needed naps or anything.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. I mean, and it happened. I mean, she just like all human beings, you get tired, and then, you know,
absolutely.
At
we've
her
all
age,
got our limits.
It did
so amazing.
Yeah,
she acted the shit out of that.
I'm much older than 10, and 12-hour days makes me like, whew.
Yeah.
So,
well, listen, Bendu, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, Carmen Cuba and her entire casting crew did an amazing job to find her, and I just think assemble everybody into, you know, I think an amazing group of.
Do you know how long the casting?
I was worried about
how long the search was finding.
Knocked it out.
I don't know the specifics, but it was, you know, kind of right. I wouldn't say to the last minute, but the net was cast globally pretty well. I mean, you know, the UK, the United States, and Canada were, you know, the big wide ones. But I think, you know, I'm pretty sure she went wider at times. I don't know all the details, but it was hugely important.
Sure.
Not only to find someone with some acting chops at that age, but then, you know, a resemblance
visually,
and somebody who has the ability to, you know,
look like one.
Digest what Carrie Fisher brought to that role,
Yeah.
and sprinkle those isms into the performance. And yeah, she was an amazing find.
Absolutely. I really want to ask about the Fortress Inquisitorius and the how faithfully it seems that final order, the final level of Jedi Fallen Order was recreated. That's obviously everyone's first time seeing the Inquisitorius, and so this was kind of like a return to a location that was pretty well known. Was the video game open on set at any point? Did like the team explore the levels, or was there any kind of interaction with the video game during the design process, or did you simply pull up the concept art from the game, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, Doug Chang was quite involved with that game, so he, I think, had a kind of a backroom approach to it, which is, most of it had existed, including the, what I was nicknaming the war room, which was the octagonal room where we saw the lightsabers on display on the red cases.
The Padawan helmets, bro.
Yes,
chilling.
And, and then basically where their war room table was.
When
that kind of existed again in the game. I think the corridors we were just imitating for the most part. We did not replicate any of the game levels as such. We were, I can say specifically, the layout of the corridors, we were backing into the action that Deborah and Jojo, our stunt coordinator, came up with. So we were kind of reverse engineering to the narrative needs.
We need to run this way, then go that way, then
correct.
Gotcha.
Through a maze of about 200 yards, about 600 linear feet of corridors, we were able to get I think roughly 4 different looks as Obi makes his way through the Inquisitorium. So
it's interesting how like it borrows so much from other Imperial locations. Like there's nothing very unique about the designs on the walls or the window shapes, but just the presence of that pale blue water and the light that casts in the hallways makes the Fortress Inquisitorius very unique as an Imperial location. I love the moment when the window breaks and the water floods through and drowns those stormtroopers. Was that CGI? Was that practical? Like, did people really get submerged? How did that work?
It's a combination of everything you just mentioned. So there are practical elements, water spraying, that kind of interactivity, the troopers running and kind of the water getting, taking them out from under their feet. But then there is, a reasonable amount of VFX supplement.
Sure.
Water's really hard to do digitally because of the computing power it takes, because you're not just animating, you're actually doing simulation, and doing hydraulic simulation and getting it to look right is just very costly. And the rendering time, because you can't do scan line rendering, you have to ray trace it so you get the reflections and the refractions probably. So all of that just takes tremendous time and computing
it's just
power.
much more practically.
You try to do as much practically and or shoot elements. That's something we do quite often, is just shoot either pyro, electrical, water effects against black. And I think, when you look back on the prequels, for example, some of the great, I think it's Naboo, some of the amazing waterfalls that appear to be like 400 yards, 500 yards. That's salt. That's salt being poured. Yeah. And
that's so cool. That's so brilliant.
The camera's overcranked, so it's shooting at a high speed, and it's just salt being poured against black. And when you composite it with a little bit of other, dust and water vapor, it looks, just like a big waterfall. So those old school techniques that were developed through the 30s, 40s, and 50s, they're still utilized a little bit less and less. But anytime we can, do a real miniature shot or anything
makes it real.
Were there a lot of miniatures used?
No, actually, in our show, there were no miniatures. It was almost all.
So the ships weren't shot practically. It wasn't like Mandalorian with the Razor Crest doing actual passes.
No, no, we did not build. To my knowledge, Pat did not build any practical miniatures. Now, there, again, I could be wrong, but I'm not there. Once the visual effects path starts, I'm not there for everything. So
sure.
But I'd be surprised if Pat did any actual miniature work.
You did say the mole dude's truck was real, though.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Of course, like any of the vehicles that you see people driving, etc., those are all practical builds. But as far as, for example, we didn't build a miniature T-47, like a 10th scale or 12th scale or 16th scale.
Sure.
No large scale or small scale miniatures. We built a lot of one-to-one mock-ups.
That's impressive on its own.
Thing. How did you guys do the temple, or not the temple, the amber prison illusion? Like, how did you guys shoot that? Because obviously they're not like, frozen up in there, but like, yeah, how did you guys get the glass to look that way, or like get them suspended?
Well, the cast members are actually on kind of like little pedestals that would have, that are just basically, kind of diving board in from the back. So they're actually on something, and they're just, they're really good at staying still for 10 to 15 seconds, not blinking, that kind of thing.
I wasn't convinced they were real actors when I saw the episode. I was like, is this CGI? Are they like digitally frozen? But no, they're just really good at staying still.
We did play around with actually trying to create an amber layer of kind of crackling, etc. But we just did not have great success. And so in the end, we just put in a piece of plexiglass, some gel, which is just essentially kind of an acetate plastic that's used for lighting, and that basically gave us our color. And then
that gave
visual effects kind of filled that space with volume. Chung Hoon Chung did light it in an amber way so that the amber cast was on the
amber color was,
so the light is on the actor face.
The color felt very deliberate and specific, and I wondered if it was a reference to the mosquito trapped in amber from Jurassic Park, which is a very iconic visual. It seemed like it was a very deliberate choice of color for that. Do you know if that was the rationale behind it, or what? I think amber. It's a new color for Star Wars too. Usually technology like stasis and things are reds and blues.
Right. I think I know that as we were exploring colors, I was just leaning into, I think, the language and vernacular that became so prevalent in Jurassic Park, where I think that kind of cemented the idea that amber was a way that bodies were preserved. And it became kind of a believable thing. And this goes back to how we try to anchor things in the Star Wars universe to our real world universe. And I think, that, Jurassic Park kind of democratized that science knowledge of what amber does. And it's a great way for archaeologists, anthropologists, etc., to be studying past biological species, because it's such a pure preservation method. So I think, for me, that's where it was grounded. Plus, I think, as you said, it was a nice complementary color to, the reds and the blues, and it was just.
It was a very haunting yellow.
I can't wait to grab my Jedi action.
Yeah, there is a little.
Build them up with resin.
It's not a straight orange. There's more.
It totally looked like it was filled with resin. So yeah, it's cool that to know in the real story that they're like, they're
Vader collects Jedi in mint condition, confirmed.
Yeah, but in the practicality, they're actually just action figuring themselves. But they are like frozen in there, though.
I know you don't know names, and I know you don't know specifics, but do you know a number? Do you know how many Jedi were in those vaults?
Well, if I recall right, there were 5. There's 5 bays, so there's 10 bays just in that, and then. Let's see.
Oh, because it's 5.
Are they all full?
40. Yes. There's no vacancies. So
5 bays with 10 pods each.
I think we're I would speculate that it's probably 4 to 5 dozen.
That's a lot of Jedi.
It's stacked on stacked.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
of
I mean,
Jedi.
the idea was that there were 2 stories in the spaces, but as there were different segments, it'd be like going to public storage. There's like certain buildings or isolations. And
U-Haul Jedi storage, man. Oh,
yeah.
that's amazing. That's a scoop right there. That was not known knowledge.
So dark.
So many Jedi. That is fascinating. That is absolutely.
They're all siphoning midi-chlorians out of them, technically. Oh, bro.
Yeah, I mean that's a great speculative way to approach it. Which
it's kind of
it becomes obviously that's episode 1 of Mando is Werner Herzog's character.
Everything's feeding into
trying so hard to do make gains on that kind of technology.
I will spare everyone my all roads lead to Exegol rant because I go on it all the time. Yeah. But every Disney Plus show has given us some little inkling speaking to that eventual cloning of the midichlorians, trying to create a Snoke copy. Like that's where it's all going. I never thought that there was any sort of Mandalorian fuckery happening with the vaults. I thought that they were trying to create like siren lures a la Luminara Unduli in Star Wars Rebels, which when I think about it, her little prison had the exact same shade of amber in her stasis.
More blue.
So this was an established color way back in 2015, whenever that episode of Rebels aired, I guess, or it's a coincidence. But I did notice that there was a similarity in that.
I was gonna say she definitely seemed more mummified versus being the petrified.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the full intention was. I saw it as a tomb. Like it was like these people are dead as a doornail. They are. It's like, yeah, you might be able to pull some DNA from them, but again, I'm not speaking for Lucasfilm or anyone in
right.
Of true creative capacity, but I just always thought it as like it's a trophy room. It's just like, look what we did.
Sure.
And there's no more of them.
Jedi taxidermy. Yeah. Force sensitive taxidermy.
Again, just as a caveat, that's just my 8 cents.
Oof.
The latest season of Dexter that came out, have you seen it?
I haven't seen the last season. I loved the show.
You're right.
Well, okay. Mild spoilers. There is a very similar sequence where Dexter uncovers the trophy room of another serial killer, and he walks down a hallway, and the lights turn on these booths, and these victims have been displayed like mannequins, and it just seemed like a very, very interesting like similarity in terms of like the pacing of the scene, the way that they're. And I wanted to know if that played any sort of an influence. I'm not sure when it was shot, if they were shot around the same time.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, those kinds of serendipitous things happen so frequently. Where, good ideas are kind of like dreams, but a lot of people can be having them at the same time. So
there's a finite number of things you can have happen.
Yeah, but listen, as filmmakers, we're all influenced by each other's. Like I have a ferocious appetite. I mean, there's not a streaming network that I don't subscribe to. I try to see everything that I can. I
imagine it strengthens your craft, right?
100%.
What your contemporaries are doing.
Ideas. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I listen to as many podcasts and watch as many YouTube channels as I can.
Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely. So there's been a lot of talk. I've seen a lot of like interestingly charged opinions about this. A lot of comments will be applauding James Earl Jones on the voice performance that he did as Darth Vader. And then there'll be a lot of replies saying it wasn't him. It was this respeecher technology. And it almost always turns into an argument about who gets the credit for it. And I just wanted to ask you if you could clear the air as somewhat of an authority here. Was James Earl Jones, did he give his voice? Was respeecher involved? Was it a combination? Like what exactly happened there?
I mean, listen, that's part of the process I'm not privy to, but okay. Mr. Jones, he was participating, and it's one of those things where the timbre of someone's voice as they age does change.
Sure.
And respeecher is an amazing technology, but it's it's another tool in the toolbox, and I don't know to quite what extent it was used and implemented. But I can't see how some level of Pro Tool of
He sounded
audio
easily 20
manipulation.
years younger, whatever they
Yeah, exactly. So there's sound engineering that's going on to try to make, ground it again in the same way that we're visually trying to anchor it between episode 3 and episode 4.
And then Rogue One.
The sound department and even the music department. I mean, again, not to go off topic, but it's like everybody is trying to, work towards, it's kind of obvious why we just, why Deborah just didn't lay down John Williams' soundtrack is that the Empire isn't the Empire yet. So you just can't be throwing the Empire theme around.
The last second.
You can't, it's like there's so many reasons why.
We don't hear the Imperial March at all in A New Hope. It's
Right.
not until The Empire Strikes Back.
That's right.
So,
that's right. And
if
I
you
think
were watching all these in sequence, it would seem like a weird interruption that suddenly it goes away for a while.
And again, I
You
can't
don't even hear it in Rogue One.
Yeah,
No.
and I can't speak for the other filmmakers, but I know like Natalie Holt, our composer, she quotes passages and phrases from John Williams' stuff. I think there's a moment where the asteroid battle is kind of just nuanced a little bit with the Star Destroyer sequences.
It was so.
And that's
so
and then, that's again, this is 10 years before episode 4, so why would you use the same? It's
like a proto motif, if you will.
It was a beautiful bridge between these two pivotal films, and it's trying to be respectful and pay homage to both, but also just allow it to stand on its own.
I think it speaks to the brilliance of John Williams choosing to use leitmotif as his style for composition, because you have these individual themes that you can pay reference to, but you can break the theme down and have like an infant version of it. Like, for example, in Rogue One, we don't hear the Imperial March, but we do hear bum, 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 bum. It teases us just a little bit. It's a suggestion of the motif, but because it hasn't developed in the story yet, the music has to follow suit with that. And so when Natalie has these little things that they're nodding their head to motifs that we will hear later in the story, and if you are familiar with the music, then you instantly will hear it and get excited for it. But it's not too on the nose. Like if it was nothing but John Williams, you'd be focusing on that more so than the action, I think.
And again, these are all just choices that we're making, and they're not wrong and they're not right. It's just it's the choice. It's the choices.
They're creative decisions.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's
so there was an article that came out on IndieWire a little while ago, talking about how originally Kenobi was sort of conceived and developed as 3 films rather than a TV series. And then after like the poor numbers that Solo generated, they kind of went back to the drawing board, and it was kind of reconstituted into a 6-episode series.
Mm-hmm.
At what point were you brought on after the? Were you doing concepts while it was considered to be 3 films?
No. By the time I was involved, it was, vehemently and hard defined as a limited series of 6.
So there were strong feelings.
Sorry, say that again.
So there were somewhat strong feelings. They're like, we're definitely not doing a movie. This has to be a show.
But at the point that I came on, because the show was originally going to be staged and shot in London, England. Actually, I was in Budapest,
Pinewood,
doing another movie at the time, and many of my friends were working on the Obi-Wan movies, that were going on in London. And it was just a decision was made by the powers that be to just retool and rethink the approach. So it was shuttered, kind of went down. And, at that time, oddly enough, my relationship with the show started because the show went down. I was able to get a great supervising art director off the show who was just about to start. They pulled the plug. He came to Budapest to help me out on that film. And then sure enough, on almost a year, well, not quite a year later, I come back to LA, and the show is being retooled, and it's decisions made to stage it.
So there was close to a year of pre-production before that decision went down.
No, I can't say that a whole year of pre-production. Probably, again, I'm not quite sure the timeline, but probably 2 to 3 months of them building up and starting to get going. They had not started building at all.
Gotcha.
I know there were several ideas that Doug had already outlined. I mean, there's a certain amount of things that are going to be known. We know where Ben is. We know there's Tatooine aspects. So some of that early, again, 40,000 foot design that Doug would have been doing, I think carried over and was able to be reutilized. But by the time I came on, I think the story had, not taken a left turn, but had changed. I'd say I'm guessing significantly, but I'm not quite sure.
I wanted to speak a little bit more to that, to the changes to the story. It was already heavily retooled the first time you got your hands on it with what concepts you had to generate. Were you at any point asked to do concepts for Commander Cody as a character? Was he in the mix at all in the early stages?
No, not directly. I mean, I think there were times where, every so often during that earlier development phase, I think, the odd idea would be thrown out, but what you see is pretty well what I got to start with. There was not a lot of change in those 6 months. So by the time I started, it had really been flushed out. I mean, I think some minor changes, for example, how much we saw Vader, the circumstances we saw Vader, how much of his assembly process, that was kind of slightly new territory.
God, which I'm so glad we got to see.
We saw him get built, but we hadn't seen him, what does his daily dressing routine look like? So
yeah, dude.
there were some fun new things that,
and Hayden,
all that stuff had been flushed out.
Hayden had to really go through some things to film those sequences of the like the back to tank regeneration. Like how much of that was practical? How much of that was digital?
Well, both back to tanks were practical, and it's actually the same plexiglass cylinder, because we could only afford to have one built, and it's optically clear 1/2-inch plexiglass, or acrylic, I should say. And we essentially redressed that acrylic cylinder for both Vader's kind of high-tech corporate version, as you said.
Which you kind of saw in Rogue One.
Yeah, exactly. Which we were actually able to repurpose the Rogue One design. So that's, again, the amazing thing about working with Lucasfilm, is that they have all that stuff archived and on record. So it was just a matter of pulling those drawings, breaking it down, and doing, our economical version of it.
That's so cool.
And then that acrylic cylinder was then repurposed for the dunk tank on Jabim.
I really like that we got to see such a juxtaposition of like these two different technologies, and showing that there's more than one way to have a back to bath.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. You get the same quality of treatment. It's just the trailer park version, and then the BMW version. And
it's ironic too that with all of these extra amenities, Vader's most likely in more discomfort. Like he's not able to appreciate any of that comfort because he's Vader. He's lost his limbs.
Yeah.
He's
Palpatine always part of the original plan?
Pardon me? Was
Palpatine always part of the original plan, or was that sort of like a last minute story change as well?
No, I seem to remember it from the time that I started on the show. There was always
we're gonna flash.
I remember one of the very first pieces of concept art that came out was Vader in his chair talking to someone in a hood on the hologram, and I kind of inferred that was Palpatine. So that was one of the first pieces of concept art that we were shown.
Yeah,
might have been Reva though from that one scene.
I just I'm always how we keep our secrets is always amazing, because with Grogu, you know, for
Achievement of
us
the
trying to
century right there.
keep Leia, you know, keep those cards close to the table. You know, everybody knew they were getting Vader, and they knew they would probably get, you know, Hayden as Anakin. But I think, you know, the level of which I think, you know, the show rewarded fans with those moments
is true.
I'm
It was haunting.
Pleasantly
are
happy that
haunting.
that stuff was wasn't revealed until the, you know,
It
the
was
episode dropped.
very impressively preserved. There were a couple of rumors that I heard before the production before it came out, and a lot of them turned out to be false too.
Right.
I wanted to ask a little bit about the process of protecting and safeguarding those secrets. How intense was security? Was there like the spoiler police going around and taking people's phones? Was there in fact misinformation being leaked on purpose?
A bit of everything. I mean, security on the sets are so tight that even somebody with my credentials and you know, and title, I pulled out my phone a few times where it's like, I don't have my, you know, Lucasfilm issued device, and
Right.
it's like, I got to get a photo of this and send it to one of my art directors so that we can keep moving. And I yanked the phone out, and security was on me. It's like,
on you.
Todd, you gotta put that away. And it's like,
You're not above reproach.
I know, you know, I know security on first name basis, but we have to, you know, it's super important. We all protect it. We protect
Absolutely.
each other, and you know, and no one's. I think everyone. We pride ourselves on being able to, you know, protect those secrets. And
just as an aside, what if someone were to like just go rogue and just like go Facebook Live on their phone, like from this, they'd be tackled, right, and like just dragged out of there. That's obviously an extreme situation, but like people are taking this very seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen that directly. I mean, I know that there have been a few cases. Yeah, I mean, there have been a few cases on some of the Marvel films where people have, you know, managed to snake in. I mean, we did have a leak. There was, you know, a family member of somebody at the mining company that, you know, basically got 90 seconds out a truck window as this truck, you know, drove down the streets of Mos Eisley and Anchorhead, and that stuff got posted. You know, it was of course taken down, but it had made its way. You can argue that no press is bad press, and you know, that's not a spoiler. We know that we're going to get some Tatooine action,
right?
So it's, in the end, it's not the worst thing. But you know, actors in costumes, like even on the lot, you know, moving from building to building.
This year we have seen them in the smocks.
Yeah, everyone's in a black
remember,
smock. It's like, yeah. I mean,
I was definitely like trolling for leaks for The Last Jedi, and there was lots of scenes from Canto Bight of like, I remember poring over those shots of the Canto Bight security for translating their helmets and stuff. Yeah. And there's all these people just wearing like black bathrobes. Right. And there was all this conjecture at the time of, like,
thought it was going to be
cultists. It's like, no, they're casino goers that they don't want you to see their outfits.
Yeah.
I appreciate the level of secrecy because I don't know. I'm so torn inside. I have to know. I have to know everything, and I need to know now. But I also want to have a good theater experience, audience experience too, and I want to have some things preserved for me. So I'm my own worst enemy when it comes to these things.
Yeah, and it's obviously so much easier these days to do that. I mean, again, harkening back to when, you know, episodes 4 and 5 were made, you just, like, most people didn't even know Empire was being made. You know, you know, it was, I think if I recall right, it was codenamed Green Harvest. Anyways, you know, most shows have various nicknames or code names, etc. And you know, it was definitely easier back then. Now it's just you know, once something's out there, it's out there. So,
what was the code name for Obi-Wan Kenobi?
I think it's quite well known now because I know that there are some coins that have been, you know, passed around. So we were known as Joshua Tree.
Joshua Tree. Which makes sense because there's Joshua trees all over Mapuzo.
Was it episode 3 or 4 that we got to see?
Episode 3 in Mapuzo, yeah.
I like that. I like that a lot.
That fucking Confederate mole person.
Freck. Which was Zach Braff. Was he in the costume?
No.
Oh
no, that was actually John Rosengrant.
The
John Rosengrant is a little bit of creature history. You know, I can't even begin to.
Park. Yeah.
Yes, I mean he you know, worked for Stan Winston for almost all his career. Started there as a very young man. He's half of the alien mother, the alien queen in Aliens. So if you've had anyone who's seen the Glad garbage bag alien test footage that Cameron shot way back in whatever year that was, 85. John Rosengrant, I think, is on the left side.
Amazing.
You know, operating the left arm. And John just recently retired, actually. I think Freck may not have been his very last on-screen performance.
At the end of the career, though.
But one of, it may or may not have been his swan song. So,
well, it was a great performance. He's a great little memorable character that really pops in the small moment of the episode that he's in.
You know, and then that's the tongue. You know, that's the fun kind of tongue-in-cheek, on the edge of corniness of Star Wars that I adore. I mean, I don't mind.
Oh, it definitely feels like it leaned into the camp, and I'm all about it.
Yeah.
Star Wars is at its core a campy 70s
pro-empire fucking flag. Yeah.
I just noticed that someone corrected me. Yes, it was Blue Harvest. Green Harvest was a code name of something else I worked on, which was, you know, paying homage to Blue Harvest. So yeah,
nice. Oh, that's right. The Family Guy Star Wars parody is called Blue Harvest, in reference to that same title as well.
Oh, hilarious!
There was also an IndieWire article that came out recently talking about the character of Reva, saying that originally in the script she died at the end of the story.
Oh,
do you know that to be true? Were you aware of that in early drafts of the story?
I do not recall that, and I got all 6 episodes right off the bat when I started. I do not seem to remember that.
And the ending pretty much resembled what we ended up with.
Yeah, I mean, everything was close. I think the structure started to push and pull quite a bit. You know, I think the minor changes aren't even worth mentioning, only because I think the other thing too is that as they were streamlining and settling to what the series fun was, there may have been leftovers from prior drafts that I may or may not remember clearly, so I really don't want to speak to them.
That's fine. So you were aware going in that this used to be films. Now it's 6 episodes of it's a short form TV. Did you know what the second and third film? I'm presuming that the first film is kind of what was condensed into these 6 episodes and adapted. But do you know kind of what the idea narratively was supposed to be for those second and third films?
I have some semblance, an idea of what kind of was pitched as an overall arc of those films. Again, can't really speak to them because it's unknown as to where the future of a season 2 would even exist. And honestly, I have no idea where that's landing. I mean, other than what I think Kathy Kennedy mentioned a few weeks ago, which is just, it's on the table. I'm sure people are talking about it until the dust settles. I mean, there's a very long-term plan for the Star Wars franchise, and there's only so many pockets for so many shows, and how you can't just jam a new show in. So, to what extent about how that will evolve. But there's a lot of moving pieces. As shows start to get gestate and evolve, sometimes it just feel like this may be better in another 2 years. There's a commitment, but then there's also just the fluidity of what are people's reactions? What is where's how is the fan base reacting? What is their pure appetite?
I feel like
and the appetite's so wide that I
Right.
think it's always under analysis as to how to proceed.
I feel like it's safe to say that Lucasfilm is somewhat more cautious to how the fans receive things after like maybe Solo's initial reception. Like that definitely seemed to make them question the rollout and go away from these standalone stories and more to Disney Plus shows, which seems to have been very successful. But that being said, I would be very disappointed if we don't get more standalone stories as films, because I think that traditionally that's where Star Wars has always lived. It's fine if it finds a new home narratively on a streaming platform, but I think we'd be missing something if we didn't get any more Rogue Ones,
Oh yeah. We still.
I wanted
I
wanted to ask if there was anything dramatic that happened, like off camera, like props getting broken, things being missing. I'm thinking sandstorms wrecking the set of Tunisia in The Phantom Menace. Like, were there any mishaps that we wouldn't really hear about on a Disney Gallery episode?
Fortunately,
the ship?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, we were pretty event free. I mean, the reality was, because we were, trying to stick to some very, very hard COVID protocols.
That's true. That was going on at the same time.
There was, I think, a larger level and awareness of everybody taking care of themselves and safety itself. And so, I mean, I know, speaking of props breaking, I mean, I can't think of, a week that would go by where, something went wrong. So, if it wasn't Jan Pascal, our set decorator, leg breaks on a table, or Brad Elliott, our prop master. I mean, there were always backup lights. There's two lightsabers, of everything, because inevitably something happens.
Need a spare.
Something goes down. Batteries start to fade. The new one.
I've heard the volume
the
breaks pretty often.
Sorry,
I've heard the volume breaks fairly often. Or at least needs to be like stopped and set and reset and fixed.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of calibration that can start. It's almost like the time code or the syncing. Sometimes if you're streaming, every so often the audio will start to drift. So that can happen on the volume. You can get calibration drift. But it's it's like anything. It's like getting a hair in the gate. In the old days of shooting film in a camera, it's just stop, clean it out, brush it out. So it's just it burns time on set, but the downtime, again, we were really fortunate. There were a lot of horseshoes being carried around by people, because we had just the best luck possible. We even the hardest thing, there was some real crappy weather for us. And when I say crappy weather, it's like trying to shoot Tatooine. You got twin suns with no atmosphere, and yet the first day we are shooting Mos Eisley, cloud cover all day. So, that's
character world.
That's the bummer thing. But Chung Hoon is just amazing. He had a couple of cranes there, some really large lights, and he did an amazing job to kind of mask it. But if you look at episode 1, the blue skies of Tatooine aren't always there. We're just dealing with, with those weird California June days where you get this June gloom, we call it. And, the marine layer blows in, and then you have desert and ocean, and the air in between can get just socked in, and it just doesn't change.
In a way, having a little bit of gloom over our normally bright and hazy Tatooine almost works on an aesthetic level, considering that we start off
Yeah.
Start off from the perspective of Obi-Wan, who is himself very much enshrouded in gloom in his own mind. So, like, it could be, you could make the argument we're just seeing it through his jaded lens at that time.
And you've got the Inquisitors showing up, which is just, that's as sour of a day at Mos Eisley anyways. So
it becomes very subtly effective too, because then in the final episodes, it's very bright and sunny.
Yeah.
You get that juxtaposition.
It's true.
One other thing that I really wanted to ask you about was the process of designing damaged Vader. Because we've seen damaged Vader so many times in different properties. The Force Unleashed, famously, Twilight of the Apprentice, season 2 finale of Rebels. Did you try to avoid other versions of Vader? Did you try to come up with something uniquely, or did you try to pay homage to as many like moments of Vader, like having the helmet ripped off or like exposed arm?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a meme that was going around. It might have even been posted on your Discord server, which just showed, 3 iterations of that. And again, none of that's by accident. I mean, we're very aware of how it had been established in prior ways. And, then those again, not being, at the story level all the time or in those conversations all the time, I can see that would be the Dave Filoni influence, where he's broken ground on that. So there's a certain familiarity to it. Filoni and Favreau are definitely involved extensively in the Star Wars universe, but this was intrinsically Deborah Chow's story. I think Dave and John were involved in the way that they'd be reading scripts and giving thoughts and comments, but they were never on set hanging around making suggestions. It was wholeheartedly Deborah's show, with Joby, our head writer and showrunner.
It looked so cool. And as someone who, I don't know, I always call myself a Star Wars completist, because what really gets me going is seeing multiple eras represented on screen. So seeing Hayden Christensen with the iconic mask, hearing half of his voice and then half of this like James Earl Jones, it was as good as it's going to get. It was amazing.
Dude, seeing the eye color change too, like, it was so
absolutely
fucking
amazing.
Yeah.
This has been such an incredible experience, getting to talk to you, getting all these little secrets and extra details about how the process works of bringing a show like this to life. What are you currently working on? What do you have planned in the future?
Yeah,
tell the people a little bit about what you've got in store for us.
Well, I'm, I can't.
If you're allowed to.
Yeah, it's a little tricky right now. I mean, some of the stuff I'm right now. I'm not working on Star Wars or Star Trek. I'm involved with another science fiction opus. Maybe a little bit more will come out in the future. I'm fortunate to stay busy all the time. The options are always there. I had an amazing experience on Obi-Wan and, earlier on The Last Jedi. Love being part of the Star Wars family. So, if someone Doug picked up the phone,
I was going to say, is Deborah's number on your phone?
Yeah. It was just, again, it was a privilege. As I say, like a few people have said to me, oh, it must have been just your dream job, a dream come true. And, this was never even on my radar, because again, going back to the 9-year-old boy seeing the show, I would never even guess that this opportunity would present itself. So super fortunate. And I guess just in closing, if you guys want to continue the conversation in another month or two, I'd be happy to come back, because I know
we would love
probably a boatload of stuff that we just started scraping the surface. And now that we've kind of laid down the groundwork,
the series
what
is
I
done.
do and so forth. And
absolutely, that would be
maybe in September or something. I'd be happy to.
We'd be so honored to have you back. That would be so cool. And I've also noticed that we've got Skip Torvinen in the chat here, who is the one of the prop masters.
Yeah,
Obi-Wan Kenobi. Get in here, man. Jump on. You guys got to come on together. We definitely need to hear all of the secrets that you guys have.
Yeah, I mean, now that the show has completely dropped, I mean, I think, you know, that might be fun, is to get a couple of my crew people on, because it's not, I can't say enough about the importance of my crew. It was the best in the world. And
the work really spoke for itself, in my opinion.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, everyone,
very evident.
anytime I would go to the shop after hours, like, you know, when everyone was supposed to be home, I'd catch up with Jan. We were there in our 13th or 14th hour. There were still people in the shop working, not getting paid. You know, people just love doing this stuff. We're fortunate to be paid to do it, but
contractually, I must clock off, but my passion makes me keep working.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that. I love knowing that Star Wars is in such good and passionate hands, you know?
Yeah, actually, I you know, Brad Elliott, our prop master, would be a great guest, because he's at a geek level of you two guys, and a lot of, oh, great. Yes, I agree. I completely agree. I mean, he could speak to so many of, you know, he could get into the weeds with you guys and the fans.
Love it.
You're like, this is how we made the space whale.
The salmon.
Hey, man, never say never. We might get a live action space whale in Ahsoka. I've got my fingers crossed. Yeah. Fingers crossed. Oh man, well, this was such a treat. I can't say it enough. Like, I'm over the moon. We got to have this
again.
conversation.
You know, the two of you, again, Kyle, Bendu, I can't thank you enough for what, you know, the community that you're fostering here. Which, you know, again, we're all open to criticism, but I love the positiveness and you know, the enthusiasm. It's great to kind of bask in this, because this is why we do it, not only for ourselves, but, you know, for these, you know, the great fans that you have in your community.
I mean, I have to give a shout out to my own community. They are some awesome, wholesome, positive people.
It's true.
I have made an effort to try and surround myself by like-minded Star Wars fans, and we grow by the dozens every day. We've got a Discord server. You can always find everybody commenting on YouTube, and we're just here to have a great time and enjoy Star Wars. And having that positivity recognized by the people making Star Wars is the ultimate validation for us. And I'm on cloud 9. I'm on cloud city 9 right now about this.
All right, gentlemen, be well.
Thank you so much for being on. And thank you everybody for watching the podcast. That is it for Dork Forces. Stay tuned. We've got some more awesome guests lined up for the coming weeks. Thank you so much. I'm going to play us out with a meme. And as always, may the Force be with you.
The Trade Federation have no presence there.
How can you be sure? It's controlled by the Hutts. You can't take a Royal Highness there. The Hutts are gangsters. Gangsters.